Hey guys, welcome back to Covenant Canon. At the Campfire live event of the Halo World Championships of 2023, it was announced that we will be getting a brand new Halo novel. A novel that takes place in late 2559 all the way up to 2560, during the rise and fall of the created Halo Empty Throne. And as of this week, it has been fully released to the public. Now, as for myself, I was given an early copy of the book last week, and I finished it relatively quickly, as is my normal. And to no surprise, it is a fantastic read. Not only for myself as a die-hard Covenant and Banished nerd, but for all other lore fans out there. Now, like I said, this book is set in late 2559, more specifically after the events of Shadows of Reach, and it takes us through all through that year up until 2560. This book contains a whole lot of UNSC, Banished, Swords of Sanghelios, and other faction lore. Now, for obvious reasons, I'll be covering only the Swords of Sanghelios, the Banished, and Covenant stuff. If you guys want to see a full-on breakdown of the book, I would highly recommend you check out Hidden Xperia's channel. However, I should warn you all, this video will contain a plethora of spoilers from the book. If you want to read this book with fresh eyes, I would highly recommend to skip ahead to the timestamp here. But without further ado, let's get right into it. This is Halo Empty Throne. For the first section of the book, let's go right into the Banished. Here we're introduced to Severin, a young war chief that has risen high among the Banished hierarchy. Let's get into some of his background. He was loyal to the Covenant during the events of the Great Schism. In fact, he was leading a Covenant fleet to Saipon Kal, the Sangheli fortress world that Zaitanjar Watinri had rallied his followers. A world that had been destroyed in a Nova Bomb explosion. It was here that Severin's own ship, the Eye of Prophecy, had seen the destruction of the planet. After the Covenant fell, he formed his own clan, the Vanguard of Zaladin, and set themselves up on Wariel, one of the three moons on Doisak. It was here that they warred off against rival chieftains and fended off against prevailing winds. It wasn't long until he was offered a place among the Banished, at the urging of his cousin, Choros. Now, for those who don't know, Choros was the nephew of Tartarus, and he was a supporting character in the bonus chapter of Shadows of Reach, named Sacrifice. Within a year after joining the Banished, Severin became a war chief, establishing a legacy for the Banished for the next 6 years. The chapter opens with him and his captains, Othmal and Kavis, escorted by Hyperius through Ghosts of Helidry, the personal dreadnought of Atriox. And it's clear that Severin isn't really popular within the Banished leadership, due to his father's rather infamous reputation. We'll go into why that is later. Once escorted to the bridge, Severin meets with Atriox, Escharum, Tavares, and the study master Ito Shaiju from Halo Outcast, who was revealed to have once served the Prophet of Regret, until he was assassinated, of course. After exchanging some pleasantries and a bit of threats, Severin reveals that one of his salvaging parties on the ruins of Saipon Kal captured a human ship. They boarded the craft and interrogated the command crew. And it's here we learn the origins of the famous Jirohana game called Tossers. In short, the game is pretty much Jirohana tearing off the limbs of their prisoners and tossing it to the nearest person there, including other prisoners. As it happened, this was an old Jirohana hunting practice, and it's meant to demoralize their opponents. In this case, it proved more than successful. for the Oni agent revealed that the UNSC Infinity was preparing to move against Zeta Halo in order to defeat Cortana. This comes as a surprise to the Banished leadership, as they knew nothing about this upcoming assault. This sparks a debate on whether or not the UNSC is after what Aatrox is after, which we now know is the Endless, or if they're simply just trying to destroy Cortana. Regardless of what their intentions might be, the Guardians would simply destroy them, which also sparks the Study Masters urging Aatrox to go after the Trikala, aka the Divine Hand, the main point of interest in Halo Outcast. In the end, Aatrox decides to split his forces. Escharum and Hyperius would rally the fleet that is preparing to move on Zeta Halo, while he and Tavares take the Hammer of Faith to go after the Trikala. As a reward for delivering this new information, Severin is placed in command of the remaining Banished forces in the galaxy. In effect, Severin is now the leader of the entire Banished home fleet. Now, let's move on to the Swords of Sanghelios, or more specifically, the crew of the Shadow of Intent. Over the years, the Swords of Sanghelios have captured a number of Sansha'yu war criminals, many of whom are imprisoned, awaiting their trial. Most of them are defiant, unapologetic about the events regarding the Great Schism and the Covenant's general betrayal of the Sangheli people. And for over 6 years, the Shadow of Intent has been hunting many other Sansha'yu war criminals, but they're after only one. A Sansha'yu High Lord named Dovo Nesto, the leader of the Order of Restoration. They were originally a clandestine sect of Sansha'yu who moved the political scenes of the Covenant in order to restore ancient Sansha'yu traditions, dating as far back as the time where their species was confined to the Forerunner Dreadnought. But after the Covenant fell apart, they had a new mission: to restore the old empire. Their leader, Dovo Nesto, is said to be as old as the Covenant itself, almost 3,000 years old. It's later revealed that this Sansha'yu uses some sort of gene-forged therapy. Now, I'm inclined to believe that this is a total pile of crap, seeing as Sansha'yu were known to be highly skilled manipulators. The Prophet of Truth was said to be the oldest of the hierarchy, and he was more than 200 years old. Now, I'm inclined to believe that over a Sansha'yu High Lord who's supposedly 3,000 years old. Regardless, he is the most powerful and influential prophet since the Covenant's downfall, and it's he who leads the Order of Restoration to bring about the restoration of the Covenant. The Swords of Sanghelios chapter begins with Tul'Juron, Vol'Soron, Stolt, and a young Sangheli named Oda Movamu boarding a stormcutter, Vigilance with Piety, captained by a member of the Order, Kafo Dine, the former Sansha'yu Minister of Abnegation. This prophet has been leading a salvaging operation on an artificial Forerunner moon. From here, he has uncovered a plethora of Forerunner objects, including several deactivated War Sphinxes. For those who don't know, War Sphinxes are something like flight suits for the Forerunners. But let's move on. The strike group's mission is to disable the Stormcutter and capture Kafo Dine in order to learn the location of Dovo Nesto. Tul was assigned to the slipspace drive, while the Blade Master got the maneuvering controls. Stolt got the weapons array, and Movamu got the power systems, which honestly was kind of the most useless end of the job. But when a group of Jirohanai pass by, the young Sangheli tries to complete his task, but is ordered to retreat by Vol'Soron, who was in charge of the mission. This didn't sit well with the young Sangheli, as it was his first mission, for he begged Shipmaster Vadum to let him go, after being snubbed after previous missions. However, like always, this young brash Sangheli breaks command and kills Ajiro Hanai, and this sets off an alarm throughout the ship. With their cover blown, Soran and Stolt make their way to the bridge to capture Dine, while Tul Jiran goes out looking for Movamu. She kills several brutes, including a captain who carries a skewer, a rather peculiar weapon for a Covenant brute having a banished weapon. But that's more of a side thing. After killing the brutes, she makes her way to Oda, who is severely wounded after fending off a dozen enemies. Over comms, she finds out from Vul and Stolt that the former minister had already left the ship and set it for self-destruct. The Scion is forced to leave the young Sangheli behind while the pair make their way to the hangar. All the aircraft were then ejected from the ship, forcing the group to take the deactivated War Sphinxes. After some trouble, they manage to get control and make their way from the exploding vessel. From there, they pursue Kafo Dine from his Ren shuttlecraft. The minister hails Vul Saran and tries to bargain with him, but when pressed to give up Dovo Nesto, he flat out refused, and revealed that several Banshees and Seraphs were intercepting their position. Vul and Stolt fend off the fighters, while the Scion goes after Dine. And let's just say, she kinda goes all cowboy and breaks protocol to shoot down Dine, which nearly leads to her own demise until she was picked up by Vul and Stolt. Their War Sphinxes are severely disabled, and they are quickly picked up by Shadow of Intent. Honestly, this chapter did a really great job of reintroducing us to the Scion. It's been more than a decade since we last saw her, and I'm really glad that they chose to bring back this ensemble from Shadow of Intent. Now let's return to the Banished. On November 8th, 2559, Severin is rallying his Zaldon forces on Wariel, while conversing with his captain and friend, Kavis. They and the other banished forces were to rally to Atriox at a location where Cortana could not reach them. There, the War Master also intended to summon the major leaders of the banished fleet, known collectively as the Eight, in order to solidify Severin's position as the leader of the banished home fleet. Severin decides to leave behind some of his Zaladon forces to protect his stronghold, in case of any repercussions from any banished chieftains. And for good reason, for it's revealed in this chapter that Severin is none other than the son of Tartarus, the chieftain of the Brutes. Because of Tartarus's fierce religion and zeal to the prophets, he's not really well regarded in Jirohanai society right now. In fact, after his death in Halo 2, rival chieftains killed almost the entirety of his family and children, save for Severin, who fortified himself in Zaladon and killed all rivals. This is what stopped the endless attacks on the Zaladon clan, and it actually got him some measure of respect among the Jirohanai, which is one of the reasons why he was approached by Atriox. And in this chapter, we're introduced to Arxis, the champion of Zaladon. He's described as a full-blown monster, even by Jirohanai standards. He was taken as a child, where his throat was slit by a rival chieftain. This left him mute, but as time moved on, he grew more fearsome and more powerful, and by the time he reached his adolescence, he killed the chieftain, and also destroyed his entire clan. The Covenant caged him all throughout the War of Annihilation, and was unleashed only to bring death and devastation to anyone in his path. But when the Empire collapsed, Severin freed him, gaining the champion's loyalty to his chieftain. He carries no projectile weapons, preferring instead a sickle-like weapon. But let's move on. Just as Severin and Kavis were discussing the state of the Jirohanai and the Banished, all hell breaks loose on Brute comms, most of them being inaudible, save for one, Cortana. As it happens, this chapter takes place just as Cortana was talking to Aatrox as shown in a flashback in Halo Infinite, just before she destroys Doisak. Here though, we get to see it from the perspective of the brutes actually witnessing the destruction of their homeworld, which is honestly tragic and horrifying. Severin then orders an immediate full-scale evacuation of Wariel as well as Tish before the event reaches their moons. Just as the Banished extract their forces, the War Chief receives a message from Eshram himself. Here we see Eshram in a full fury over what's happened, so much so that he orders Severin to raze Earth to the ground. An eye for an eye, a world for a world. The War Chief orders his subordinates to find somewhere to resettle their clan and meet with the other Banished leaders at their rendezvous point. But Severin would not join them just yet, for he must take counsel with his Daskalo. For those who don't know, a Daskalo is a title given unto an elder who is meant to bestow wisdom and knowledge to the younger. And it's this very wisdom that Severin requires from his own. Next we turn to the Shadow of Intent. 5 days after the botched mission on Vigilance with Piety, Tul Duran, still reeling from her near-death experience, is summoned to the bridge by Artas Vadum himself. The Scion decides to take a detour in the Blade Master's yard, which is basically a Sangheli training center on the ship, which gives her a sense of nostalgia from the days of the Covenant, despite the lies of the prophets. We also learn that the ship has also installed wargame simulations within the ship, to the utter disgust of Tul Duran herself. While the Scion is a member of the Swords of Sanghelios, she harbors a deep resentment for the humans, particularly because members of her own family fought them in the War of Annihilation. She even disapproves of the Arbiter's attempts to bridge the rift between their two species. She believes that the Arbiter's dream of the Concert of Worlds can't work with humans involved. In her view, the Sangheli should strike out on their own and fight their own battles. Nevertheless, Tul makes her way to the bridge, where she meets Artas, Vul, and another female Sangheli, none other than Maki Chava herself, the shipmistress of Scorn's Blade, which apparently has a formidable reputation within the Swords, boasting the most kills in their navy. Surprisingly, Tul was taken aback by the appearance of a female commander, which I find pretty ironic, particularly because it was the Scion herself that opened the way for females to enter military service. Moving on to the topic at hand, Maki reveals that her rangers had intercepted a transmission from Dovo Nesto himself. It is here where the High Lord discloses the existence of a lithos, a gateway to the domain itself. He explains that only one who was made in Cortana's likeness could gain access to this gateway. We also learn that Celine Neon himself has pledged himself and his Covenant forces to the Order of Restoration. For those who don't know, Celine Neon was a member of Julim Dama's Covenant until he rose up against the self-proclaimed Hand. He went on to form his own covenant on the colony world of Opoxicon, and now it seems that he's planning to restore the old covenant with Dovo Nesto's help. Maki Chava reveals that her rangers got this from one of Celine Neon's battlecruisers over Scala, the covenant name for Venezia. For those who don't know, Venezia is a human world that is full of criminals, vagrants, and all sorts of their ilk. Vadum and Chava questioned Duran about Celine Neon, seeing as Celine had served under her father, Tolum Duranai. This was because Tul had known the identity of her father, something that was atypical in normal Sangheli society. Regardless, Tul knew nothing of Celine nor of Scala. Nevertheless, Seeing that Nesto was apparently on a human planet, Urtas and Maki decided that they would go to the humans and ask for help. Something that Tool was incredulous about, going so far as to call the humans the N-word, Nishum. That really triggered the Halfjaw. He pulled the Scion to the corner and berated her for her recent behavior. To put it simply, she was having major cowboy antics for months, and the Halfjaw had basically told her to get her act together. He then somberly confides in her that he has lost too many under his command and advises her not to be one of those. It's clear that Artas sees Tool and the rest of the Shadow of Intent's crew as something of a family, an extension of his own clan. Though she's still reluctant to work with humans, she eventually understands the importance of Artas's words and decides to go with them. But when it's revealed that she'll be working with Spartans, let's just say she's not overly thrilled. Now, a few things. 1. Tul'Jaran seems to view Urtas and Vol'Saran as something of mentors or father figures, though she seems to have more of a strained and tense relationship with the shipmaster. This is because she is so single-mindedly fixated on killing Dovo Nesto, because in her mind, he and his entire order were responsible for the deaths of her family, which seems to indicate that Boru Anim and Tembetek, the two antagonists from Shadow of Intent, were in fact members of the order itself. Her anger was not just fixated on those two Sanshayum, but the entire organization itself. This is apparent all throughout the book, which I will disclose in due course. Moving on, Urtas, Maki, Vul, and Tool arrive at Nysa, which is revealed to be the site of the Avery Johnson Academy from Infinite's multiplayer. Also of note, they arrive in a green phantom, and that, in my opinion, is a nice nod to the phantoms we see in Halo 3. Spartan Commander Lorette Argina, the main protagonist from Infinite's multiplayer story, escorts them to the meeting, where they are greeted by Lord Hood, Admiral Osman, and Captain Abigail Cole, the daughter of the famous Vice Admiral Preston Cole. That is a really nice addition to the lore, and honestly, I'm very glad to see that we have another member of the Cole family in the UNSC Navy. It's also stated early on in the book that in August of 2557, the Banished raided a Misraya Armory production facility on Mars. Abigail Cole's Epoch heavy cruiser, Ozymandias, faced down several Carves and a Dreadnought. Though Ozymandias took down the Dreadnought and most of the Carves, the remaining ships shot down the carrier, forcing Cole to evacuate the crew and later herself. The fact that the Banished were able to raid one of the most important UNSC military plants in the Sol system itself speaks volumes to their determination and, frankly, their boldness. Also, to brief recap, Hood and Osman were stranded on Rosbach's world as the Created rose up in 2558, something that was delved on in Halo Fractures, where Osman and Hood landed on the planet with Black Box and a briefcase containing high-level Oni AIs. She was given the choice of whether or not to destroy the AIs or reprogram them against the Created. Instead, Osman did neither. She just kept them away. However, in 2559, a Guardian appeared, where they were rescued by none other than Grey Team. But their mission wasn't to extract the Admirals. On the contrary, they were there to access Black Box and the AI briefcase Osman carried. As to why, let's return to the meeting. It's revealed that both the UNSC and the Swords of Sanghelios have a shared interest in the lithos, though for different reasons. The UNSC wants to infect the domain with a strain that would eliminate any tracing remains of Cortana, so that humanity could gain control of the domain. while the swords seek the lithos because Dovonesto is interested in it. Apparently, the High Lord believes that the secrets within the domain could lead to the restoration of the Old Covenant. When the Half-Jar revealed that he was hiding on Venezia, an arrangement was made. The UNSC would extract the location of the lithos from Nesto, and after which, they would hand him over to the Sangheli. Both sides then agreed to a joint operation, with both the Shadow of Intent and the UNSC Super Heavy Cruiser Victory of Samothrace going to Venezia and apprehending the Saint Chayum. In this meeting, we learned that this lithos is but one of many on many other worlds, including both Genesis and Kamchatka, both locations originating from Halo 5. Problem is, only Cortana's neural patterns could access the domain, or someone who shared it. For those who are not versed in the lore, Cortana was made from a brain of a Flash clone of Dr. Halsey, and apparently, one of her chief scientists made off with another clone, and later on, he would commit suicide, whose brain would be the backbone of Black Box. So the only way to locate the clone is by accessing Black Box's neural network. In short, this clone is the key to the lithos, to the domain itself. They managed to reactivate Black Box and uncover the girl's location. Though at this point, BB's lifespan had more than passed its 7-year lifespan, so he was slated for final dispensation. Given the rise of Cortana and the Created, this order was enforced strictly. He is later deleted, and Osman is visibly upset by this, for she formed an attachment to BB in much the same way that Master Chief had with Cortana. But back on topic. With the key located, only activates a contractor to retrieve her, while everyone else sets out on Venezia to capture Dovonesto. And it's on Venezia where we turn to Severin and his captains. They land at the small town of Stave, at the outskirts of the Venezian capital. It's here that the war chief observes all the assortment of human, Covenant, and Banished personnel cooperating with one another. He is both surprised and, frankly, disgusted by it. As he makes his way across the town market, he spots none other than Celine Neon himself, along with a couple other of his warriors. Severin has to restrain himself from attacking the would-be prophet, because in his view, Celine Neon was nothing more than a pretender, one of many warlords seeking to claim the name of the Covenant for his own. As he makes his way to his Descalo, he discloses that the last time he saw him was on the Sangheli fortress world of Feldraka. The Descalo had based himself within the Citadel until it lost its power and supplies 2 years previously. And now, he seems to have set up shop on Venezia, where he can operate far beyond the eyes of the Swords of Sanghelios and the UNSC. After navigating through the streets of Stave, Severin came across the location of where his Descalo had been based, on a hilltop that held an abandoned human ship, guarded by 2 Tavawan skirmishers. After identifying himself, the skirmishers led him through the building, which soon became apparent that they were in fact the ship itself, until at last they came across several Sangheli guards. On the door above them had the sigil of the prophets. After being permitted entry, Severin finally meets his Descalo, which is none other than Dovonesto himself, the High Lord of the Order of Restoration. As it happens, the High Lord took Severin in his earliest days on High Charity, and became something of a father figure for the Jirohanai. Even after the Covenant fell, Severin remained loyal to the dream of restoring the old hegemony. He formed the vanguard of Zaladin and joined the Banished only to further the Order's cause. In fact, Dovonesto had promised the Jirohanai dominance over a revived Covenant military, with Severin at its head. mirroring his father. Returning to the story, Severin informs the prophet of all the events that recently took place. The destruction of Doisak, his elevation as leader of the banished fleets, and his orders to raise Earth. The Sanshayun bestows his blessings upon him, but also reveals that he should not stop with Earth, but instead go to Boundary, the location where the lithos was held. He also discloses all about the lithos, the domain, the Halsey clone, and the UNSC and the Swords now seek to control it. But before he could go further, Tul Jiran, Grey Team, and other UNSC Sword forces infiltrate the base. However, the High Lord had seemingly planned for this, so Severin and his captains escorted the prophet to his trespasser. This is one of many dropships employed by the Banished, a dropship we see in the Halo Encyclopedia. Moving on, the trespasser delivers Severin and Nesto into the arms of the local Banished fleet, which comprises of several dreadnoughts and Severin's own flagship, the Heart of Malice. Victory of Samothrace and the Shadow of Intent intercepted the fleet and destroyed several of their dreadnoughts. But out of nowhere, a Covenant fleet arrives and forces both the UNSC and the Swords to retreat. This fleet was commanded by none other than Salih Neon himself, who came at the behest of the High Lord. But just before Victory and Shadow of Intent retreated, they are given a message by Severin himself, who vowed that he would burn Earth for the sins of Cortana, a human AI. With this news of an upcoming Banished invasion, Victory of Samothrace makes his way to Earth to warn the UNSC, while the Shadow of Intent itself makes off for repairs. While in Syspace, Jai and Jiran interrogate a Sanghelian service to Nesto that they captured on Venezia. Though he was initially defiant, the Sangheli gave up the location of where Nesto would eventually go. Boundary, a human colony. But before they could question him further, however, the prisoner commits suicide by activating a toxin embedded inside him, temporarily paralyzing Tul Jiran. But she was quickly revived by human medics, and this shifted her views on humanity. Though Sangheli normally shunned medics, Jiran was surprisingly grateful to the humans for saving her life when she herself had no love for them at all. This, along with her experience with Grey Team, would go a long way in reshaping her views on the human race itself. Once Earth was warned, the UNSC home fleet was prepared for an upcoming Banished invasion. When it finally came, the Banished armada numbered over 1,300 ships, led by the Heart of Malice itself. The battle was fierce and bloody, with both sides taking significant casualties. Yet even so, the UNSC held their ground against the Banished. However, the Heart of Malice cut through many UNSC ships, before finally making its way to Victory of Samothrace. Before the Banished flagship could destroy the supercruiser, however, several Guardians appeared and began disabling ships on both sides. Just before they could destroy both fleets, however, they were mysteriously deactivated and left floating in the void of space. This is when Cortana sacrificed herself to destroy the Silent Auditorium in Halo Infinite. This is when Cortana died. Following the series of events, Severin ordered a complete withdrawal from Earth, to the surprise and frustration of all Banished leadership. Within his private quarters, the War Chief summons the major leaders of the Banished fleets. And here, we're introduced to the full members of the Eight. Chieftain Gathgor, Ektoris the White, Kaidan Drexa Uksam, Cassius, War Queen Chomar, Iruthbach, Cladius, and Valera. This is the first time we ever encounter a female brute, and with the Banished no less. It seems that Aatrox is as flexible in gender equality as El'Vadam. Honestly, I really love this assortment of banished leaders. Most are Jirohana, of course, but the Kigyar and Sangheli have their dues as well. I hope we see more of them in future Halo projects. But back on topic, the 8 are understandably angered and confused by the sudden withdrawal, wanting to press home and take the advantage in conquering the human homeworld. But Severin insists that going to Boundary would secure the lithos, and arguing that with the lithos, they could control all the devices that Cortana had to subdue the galaxy. All would be under the control of the Banished. This is something that Aatrox would have pressed home. After some debate, the 8 reluctantly agree to join Severin on Boundary. Immediately following the meeting, Dovo Nesto appears out of the darkness and congratulates Severin for convincing them to join on Boundary. And it's here that Severin quickly questions Nesto about the events on Venezia, regarding Celine Neon's involvement in driving back the UNSC and the Swords. Nesto clarifies that he is bringing together all the warring Covenant factions together in hopes of restoring the old empire. Though Severin doesn't like nor trust Neon or his Covenant, he goes along with the High Lord's schemes. Nesto further reveals his true intentions with the lithos, that he intends on entering the domain so that he could become a god, leaving Severin behind to restore the Covenant in his name. Lastly, he revealed that the Sangheli the UNSC captured earlier on Venezia had been intended to reveal their location to them, so that they could deliver the key to them. Once the Banished arrived at Boundary, it wasn't really long before they set up shop within the planet's capital of Tyran. At the city park, a flame-bore drill cuts through the ground where the lithos is supposedly located, while gore-spike cannons guard the air and the home fleet surround the city and its atmosphere. Not long thereafter, Victory of Samothrace leads a small UNSC battle group against the fleet, backed up by Shadow of Intent, while Grey Team, Tul Jiran, Volsaron, Stolt, and several Spartan 4s and ODSTs infiltrate the city, awaiting the Contractor and the Halsey clone. They then break off into 2 teams. The ODSTs and several other Spartan 4s would handle the gore-spike cannons, while the others make their way to the city to find the lithos. Elsewhere, Severin inspects the drilling with 3 of the 8, Chieftain Ektoris, Gathgor, and the Sangheli Kaidan, Dreka Ulksam. Then he's secretly summoned by Nesto, hidden away in a nearby Banished fortress. There the High Lord shows the War Chief a tablet displaying Forerunner glyphs, and a transcription that describes not only the lithos, but the domain itself. But also that the domain wasn't a creation of the Forerunners, but in fact created by their own makers, aka the Precursors. Nesto also discloses that the humans, the swords, and the key itself are on the planet. But he doesn't really go into further details on how he knows this. These revelations deeply shaken Severin, and he begins to question his loyalty to both the Covenant and Dovo Nesto. But nonetheless, he tries to continue forward, to honoring his father's legacy. Moving on, the UNSC group and the Shadow of Intent batter their way through the Banished fleet, attempting to punch a hole through the defensive zone, but to little effect. That is, until the UNSC sends reinforcements to aid them. But their fortunes quickly turn again, however, when a Covenant fleet under Celine Neon arrive to back up the Banished. As all this took place, War Chief Severin leads a search party for the Halsey clone along the edges of the city, aboard his Gravemaker gunships. He's backed up by his most elite Banished force, the Surtkar. These originated from a legendary group of hunters on Doisak. Frankly, he trusts no other than these elite soldiers to find the key to activate the lithos. During their search, they make their way to a human barn, where they are suddenly attacked by human cyclopses. With the use of his energy van braces, he disposes of the mechs and continues on with his search. That is, until he is contacted by Actorius the White. The chieftain demands answers by the war chief on the sudden arrival of Selenian's Covenant. It's here that the war chief realizes that Dovo Nesto had invited Neon to Boundary behind his back. This, along with what he learned earlier, gives him clarity that Nesto had simply manipulated him. With this revelation, Severin abandons the Order of Restoration and committed himself fully to the Banished. Returning to the Scion, she, Vol, Stolt, Grey Team, and several Spartan 4s make their way to the Banished dig site, where the lithos was being uncovered. When they saw Dovo Nesto, Celine Neon, and the Covenant forces treating with the Banished, while the meeting became increasingly tense, it was clear to them at least that the Covenant and Banished were temporarily allies. With the opportunity presenting itself, the humans gave the Sangheli their go-ahead to kill Nesto and Neon. With their carbines, the Scion and Blade Master prepared to take the shot to end the threat of the Covenant. That is, until Vol knocked Duran out and turned against his fellow strike team, along with another Spartan 4, killing his companion. Vol Saran was an agent of Nesto and a member of the Order of Restoration. It was him who warned the High Lord on Venezia, and it was him who reported their presence on Boundary. Afterwards, all hell broke loose, and the group was forced to retreat. With that, let's take a step back a bit to look at another point of view character in this book, the ONI contractor, meant to retrieve the clone and bring her to the lithos. This contractor is none other than the legendary Spartan 2 James 005, who was reportedly killed in action during the fall of Reach. But as it happens, his body was recovered by Oni and they managed to revive him. But he was left in a coma for a year, and by the time he woke up, the war was already over. But Oni reached out to him and made him a deal. They would keep him on as an independent contractor to assassinate any targets they desired. Initially, he was glad to carry on fighting, because, frankly, that was what he was made to do, fight. But over time, he grew depressed and lost all meaning for the fight. In his point of view, he is sent out to find the clone and bring her to Boundary and deliver her to Oni. And in the end, he succeeds in this task. But throughout the book, he and this clone, named Chloe Hall, form a strong bond, not unlike that of Joel and Ellie from The Last of Us. But back to the present. James and Chloe make their way to Boundary and Tyrion, and hide themselves from the Banished and the Covenant forces that are sent to find them. It was only after they split up that Chloe was ambushed and taken away by the champion of Zaladon himself, Arxis. With the key now on his way to him, Severin arrives at the dig site aboard his Gravemaker, where he is confronted by Actorius, Drekka, Celine Neon, and Dovo Nesto. Both Banished leaders demand answers from their war chief regarding the meaning of the Covenant's presence, until the High Lord reveals that he was the war chief's Daskalo and his adopted son. Severin denounces him, however, saying that he is not his father and that he has only been manipulating him for his own ends, and warns the Sangheli leader that he will too be cast aside for the Sanshayum's gain. Once he revealed that his champion had possession of the key, a firefight erupts, cultivating in Severin severing Nesto's hand, until both sides retreat on their respective dropships. Moving on to Victory of Samothrace, with the key now compromised, Cole was given new orders to destroy the lithos with the ship's twin Mac cannons. With the aid of the Shadow of Intent and a few UNSC frigates, Victory manages to fire the Mac rounds, destroying the lithos, only to be immediately rammed by Heart of Malice. The ship then plummets into a nearby ice gorge, far away from human populace. But just before the Mac rounds hit, James was able to track down Arxis, and the two engaged in a fierce brawl. Though the champion of Zaladon was able to severely injure the aged Spartan, he was killed when James stuck a live grenade into his mouth, blowing him into pieces. Just after Chloe was saved, they were confronted by Adriana herself. Though they are both glad to see each other alive, James refuses to hand Chloe over to them, as it's not clear on whether or not the girl would survive the encounter with the lithos. As expected, Adriana lets them go, claiming that both were accidentally killed by the Banished. Later, it's revealed that James's armor was failing and that he was dying. He forces Chloe to leave him and take their ship away from the planet. With the sudden arrival of the indigenous predators of Boundary, Chloe was able to get to James's ship and make it off-world, while James faces off against the Banished. He then activates the self-destruct mechanism in his armor, killing both himself and his Banished pursuers. When the Mac round finally hit the lithos, it rendered the surrounding area into a smoldering wasteland. But Severin survives the explosion. At the crash site of his Gravemaker, he gives the general withdrawal of all Banished forces from the area. But Cavis spots Dovonesto in the distance and alerts the war chief. Despite being heavily injured, Severin takes a ghost and sets off to kill the Sanshayu. At the same time, Tul Juran is separated from the others and stumbles upon a crashed Covenant corvette. But when she climbs on top of it, she also spots Dovonesto in the distance. With a beam rifle in hand, she planned on finally avenging her family. But before she got the chance, Vol Saran appeared, and the two engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Like I stated earlier, Tul Juran thought of Saran as something of a father figure, and this sudden betrayal stung her badly, and she demanded to know why the Blade Master betrayed her. According to him, the Sangheli had lost their pride and power with the Covenant, and only with its restoration could they hope to regain their lost glory. He then denounced the Arbiter and the Swords of Sanghelios as relics of a bygone time. As they battled, Sauron broke the Scion's hand and destroyed her iconic energy lance. But when the time came, he surprisingly spares her life as a final lesson in mercy. But before she could pursue him, Stolt contacted her and needed her help, as he and a fellow Spartan 4 were trapped and surrounded by Covenant forces. Throughout most of the book, Tul Juran had been single-mindedly focused on avenging her family by killing Dovonesto, and now that she was betrayed by her own mentor, she also had an urge to kill Vol Saran. But at this moment, when the chance finally came, she abandoned her single-minded cause, choosing instead to help her comrades and friends. Meanwhile, Severin battled through Celine Neon's elites to get to Dovonesto's phantom. Eventually, the War Master confronted Neon himself, and the two fought hard, ending with the latter's arm being cut off by Severin's energy blades, and then, finally, beheaded. After recovering from his battle, the war chief makes his way into Dovonesto's phantom and confronted his former Daskalo. However, when the time came to deliver the killing blow, the war chief was stabbed in the back by Vol Saran himself. The Blade Master then shut the doors, and the phantom departed the planet, leaving Severin to die in a pool of his own blood. But this was not his time, for a banished trespasser appeared, and Cavis and several warriors saved their fallen war chief. With that, the Banished and what remained of the Covenant forces left Boundary. Back to Duran, she, and later Grey Team, fought off the remaining Covenant forces that were surrounding a church, where Stolt and the other Spartan 4 were trapped. This Spartan 4, Bekedin, saved Stolt, even after being severely injured. He soon died not long thereafter. Before we go into the Swords, the Banished, and the Covenant, let's first go into one detail in Abigail Cole's epilogue chapter. They later reveal that one of the Spartan 4s that betrayed the mission, Spartan Merrick, was dead. While he did betray the UNSC, it's unclear where Merrick's allegiances lie. It seems most unlikely that he was an agent of the Order of Restoration, seeing as they want to restore the Old Covenant and pretty much eradicate humanity. The Banished seems more likely, seeing as they already have a Spartan in their ranks, Ilsa Zane, the leader of the new Colonial Alliance. But I digress. Let's return to the Shadow of Intent, where Urtas Vadum finds Tul Duran in the Blade Master's yard. The shipmaster assures the Scion that she was not to blame for the death of her family, nor in Volsaran's betrayal. He advises her to let go of her burning desire for revenge. Like Oda Movamu early on in the book, Tul Duran had been on a narrow-minded path to Dovonesto, casting aside any thought of any consequences. It was only after Boundary that she realized that Urtas was right, though she herself couldn't seem to stem the fire, but she promised the half-job that she would try. Moreover, her time with Grey Team had really softened her views on humanity, even going so far as to naming the Spartans her friends. This allows Urtas to ponder the possibility of allying with them in the future, as they attempt to hunt down the Order of Restoration, the Blade Master, and of course, Dovonesto. Now let's turn to the final section for the Banished, where we find Severin arriving at the shattered remains of Doisak. After sustaining serious injuries from the hands of Volsaran, the war chief was now placed in a life support power armor, but gave him the abilities of a new Jerohanai power gauntlet, enough that could take down entire vehicles. With both Atriox and Escharum missing, it now fell onto Severin to keep order among the Banished, to keep them from civil strife, and to keep them united, and preventing them to become as scattered as the remains of their home. The war chief also vowed to find Dovonesto and squeeze out every bit of Forerunner knowledge he carried for the betterment of the Jerohanai and all of the Banished. And finally, we get to Dovonesto himself, on board the late Sully Neon's own flagship, the Breath of Annihilation, with Volsaran at his side. It would seem that after Neon's death, what remained of his covenant had gone over entirely to the Order of Restoration. And among those is a familiar person. A person we last saw in Halo Escalation. Ait Savi. For those who don't know, he is a Sangheli mercenary employed by Oni to infiltrate renegade Covenant factions and destabilize them from within. And now, Oni seems to have their own inside man within the Order of Restoration, which could come in handy in the future to come. Back on topic, Dovonesto's severed arm has seemingly been reattached with the same gene forges that has seemingly kept him alive for centuries, though it requires some physical therapy. The High Lord then formally welcomes the Blade Master back in the arms of the Covenant, and both plan out their next move. With the loss of the lithos, they now seek to restore the Covenant in another way, on another world, filled with hidden Forerunner secrets. Secrets that led Nesto to the lithos in the first place. Cloister. This was the final destination that the Sunshine Flotilla made its way to after High Charity fell to the flood. And it was this planet that the Halfjaw and Vul Saran were searching for so many years. But beyond that, they didn't know much of anything about it. The Blade Master fiercely commits himself to the cause of the High Lord, even going so far as to quoting the final passage of the Writ of Union. Thou in faith shall keep us safe, whilst we find the path. And that's Halo Empty Throne. Like I said in the beginning, this honestly was a great read, and like I said, it contains so many space battles that I was honestly quite surprised by. And honestly, it's a welcome change. I loved Abigail Cole. She was her father's daughter in the best ways possible, even while she herself was questioning what her father would do in these engagements, as I stated before. Honestly, I really loved the Banished sections in this book. It really gave them a chance to expand as an organization, with the 8 and the elite fighting force of the Surkars. And finally, the Order of Restoration is a really neat way of reintroducing the Covenant, but in a more unique stance. With that said, there was one character that I felt was severely wasted in this book: Selenion. Throughout the entirety of the book, he kind of felt more like a background character and kind of like a minor antagonist rather than playing an actual big role in the story. But with that said, I would give Halo Empty Throne a 9 out of 10. I was really engaged in the book. I wanted to continue all throughout the day. I wanted to listen to the audiobook and hear what this story was going to unfold. And honestly, for the most part, I was very satisfied. In my opinion, guys, I would highly recommend you guys pick this up at any of your local stores or online. But what was your favorite part from Halo Empty Throne? Who was your favorite character? And which one do you want to see make an appearance in future media? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, guys, may the eyes of the prophets, the rings, and Atriox watch down upon you all. Victory to clan and kin, Covenant fans. Covenant Canon, out.